So anyway, the Explorer map then, or application, is was more of a map viewer. So just to kind of view live maps, offline maps, things like that. And then Collector is more of the actual editing and field collection. So the big part of Field Maps really to me is combining those two apps into one. But it also incorporates Tracker, which I'll show a little bit of. It's kind of like its version of like an AVL type of thing. Navigator, to me, it was an app where you could use an offline mapping navigation, but really isn't necessary anymore with the incorporation of the Google Maps and Apple Maps in there, where you can just navigate to it directly from the apps. So we'll show that too once we get into demos and stuff, but the Field Maps is capable of that now. And then Workforce kind of ties all these things together. I haven't had a use for that much, but. So overview of Field Maps. It's available now if you're using an ArcGIS Online setup. It's also available from ArcGIS Enterprise 10.6.1 and forward. I want to say there is a little bit of a issue there with, so I think on 10.6.1 you can utilize like your old Collector maps and Explorer maps within Field Maps, but I think there's a little different setup there. From what I'm reading is that 10.8.1 is the first time that the Field Maps web application's available, which is where, and I'm going to show that here, but that's where you go to actually edit and kind of make all these kind of the new functionality happen. So I think there's like a download there for if you're lower than 10.8.1 to be able to make those changes, but potentially there's some, you maybe don't have all the same functionality in 10.6.1, but so that's something we have to look at if you're interested in getting set up on that. I could help take a look at that with you, but so that's the main thing. Then I guess the other big thing that people kind of ask me is like the Esri licensing. Does it cost? Is there an upgrade cost or whatever? And it uses the same licensing you have in place for, if you're using Collector or Explorer already, more than likely you don't need to purchase any additional licenses unless you were, deciding that you're gonna make do some new things in Field Maps and you need some extra users or something. But otherwise, no additional purchasing required. Other than, tying these apps together, the SmartForm capabilities to me is the biggest upgrade to this over like Collector. We're gonna, I'll show that, and in the next slide or two, I have kind of all of those capabilities kind of listed that are there now and that are coming out soon. I talked about the ArcGIS Tracker support. I'll just show that. It'd be a little easier than going through that here. And then it does support offline maps, just like Collector did, as well as mobile map package downloads. And a mobile map package is similar to like a carry map if you guys have been using that, to where it's a map you download one time onto the device and then it's offline from there. You can use it anywhere. That's created within ArcGIS Pro. I'll show an example of it, and depending on our time here, this will go till noon, but we can go after a little bit. I can show a little bit on how those are created in ArcGIS Pro. So we'll just kind of see how the time fills out, and if we got some time and people are interested in seeing that, we can do that. So. Another important thing, as far as if you're looking to move this on to your field crews, is that it's the same look and feel of what Collector and Explorer is. There's just going to be some extra options and functionality there. So the transition, if it's something you're worried about, is not going to be a big deal. In the last year or two or whatever, they've kind of made Collector and Explorer essentially look the same. And then you just have your extra editing capabilities within Collector. So, and then another great thing is that most of those maps, and I say most, I think everything so far works, but I didn't want to say that for sure, because there could be some things that maybe don't work without making some changes, but most Collector and Explorer maps are ready to use in Field Maps right away. So you could more than likely log right into Field Maps application, just like you did into Collector or Explorer, and see those maps in the same way, and everything would work. Now, obviously there's added functionality within Field Maps that until you actually set it up, you know, it's going to look exactly the same as what it did previously, which, you know, if you just want to move it to that first and just have them kind of see those maps in the new application, you can do that. Anybody have any questions so far on anything that I've kind of go over briefly? Okay. Yeah, I mean, almost everything that is here, we're just going to go into a demo here, so there's not going to be a lot of slides. So if it's easier, you know, to ask questions, then you can do that. So as I talked about, other than, you know, combining applications and making it so that there's, you know, not 5 different apps for people to try and figure out what they need to use, you know, the second most important thing to me is the smart form capabilities. And here's kind of what they have available so far. So required fields is something we could do before, but we had to do like a workaround in the database before we actually publish the map. So now there's, and we'll go through some of this, but now there's just a checkbox of being able to you know, require that field to be entered before they submit it. We can also do read-only fields. I think before in Collector, when you would actually go into the edit mode of it, it only would show you the fields that you had editing capabilities to, which in some ways worked fine most of the time, but there's a lot of times where you still want them to see some of those other fields that have some attributes and stuff in them that they maybe need to fill out a different field. But this way you can have it read only, so they're not, you know, changing that, but they still see it. Then there's more format options now, so you can do, you know, text boxes or larger, you know, boxes there. There's a couple different things. There's like radio buttons, and then the date fields, you have a couple different options too. There's also scanning of barcodes. I think they introduced that in Collector at the end there too, but that's in the field maps as well. Field grouping is a big one. You know, before when you would go into Collector and do an edit mode type of deal where you're, you know, messing with the attributes, it's just, you basically had one long list of all the fields, and all you could really do is organize those from, you know, most important at the top to least important or whatever. Well, now you can actually group things together, and, you know, it makes collection a lot easier, obviously, when you can kind of clean some of that up. So I'll show some of that. And then conditional visibility, which is, you know, if you were to say, if they answer yes on one question, it'll, you know, bring another question or another field into that they can enter information into. So I'll show a little bit of that as well. And then the future enhancements, they're going to add, sounds like, I don't know what the timetable exactly is, but at some point we'll be able to do signatures, and then you'll be able to calculate attributes. So you could have, you know, fill 2 fields out where you're putting like a numeric value into that, and you could have another field automatically get populated, you know, maybe multiplying those 2 fields together or whatever. So that'll be helpful in some scenarios. And then the contingent values as well. Where I think it'll, yeah, if depending on how you answer a previous question, it can then say, well, you can only answer between, you know, this number and this number, or just kind of all of these things are going to just help to make data collection in the field easier for one, and 2, to get you better data in the back end. I know with collector and stuff, trying to get good data when it doesn't require somebody to fill a field out that needs to be required is tough, and you get all this bad data in the end, and then it's hard to run your queries and all that kind of stuff on it. So a lot of cool stuff that you can do, and it's all pretty easy to set up. So I'll show that shortly here. Any questions on that? Okay. And then one thing that we came across when doing it with our inspection team is that previously, if we would use like a Trimble R1 device on most of our jobs and stuff. So we'd Bluetooth to that within Collector, and we would use an app called GNSS Status from, I think that's a Trimble app as well. It sounds like that's kind of going by the wayside in this Trimble Mobile Manager that needs to be used now to kind of see that GNSS information and everything. So you do have to create an account for that. It's free and everything, but just, you send guys out to use it with like a Trimble and Bluetooth, that they have to have something to log into. Otherwise, I don't think it will work properly. So just something to know that I didn't see in anything until we just came across it. So that's kind of it as far as kind of just an overview of it. So I'll just kind of get into the demo here. All right, so the maps and everything are created in the same, your services and everything are created the same way that part hasn't changed. So I'm going to kind of skip that part. But if you're not familiar with it, typically you'd start with whatever you're looking to collect or see, or whatever you're wanting to put in your map. You would start in ArcMap or ArcGIS Pro. Put your database together, put the fields and the information and everything that you're looking to either collect or maybe you're just, making a map to view. You'd start there and you publish a service to, in this case, this is our ArcGIS Online account. So it creates a copy of that database or whatever I created and pushes it out into ArcGIS Online. If you were, set up on your server, obviously you're going to have a tie there between your server there, and the data is going to be hosted there instead. So there's the two different setups, but in the end user isn't really going to know any different. The field user is going to see the same thing. So I'm just going to go. I've already created a map, that has some functionality in it, but I'll just kind of go through the processes of what I did to get to that point, and then we'll look at it in Field Maps on my iPad after. So there's two different map viewers now that you kind of make these changes to, and there's a map viewer classic now, which is the old map viewer, and then now if you hit this drop down up here, we actually have that, I guess it's just called map viewer now. So I would say if you're already using like the classic map viewer and you're doing things in ArcGIS Online, it's probably a good time to just switch over to this map viewer. I think it just came out of beta, like early this year, but there's some functionality differences. So I would stick with one thing and do it there. So if we open that up, you'll see it's going to look quite a bit different than what the old map viewer looked like. And there's a couple important things to note there too. So I just have my map here, and I just have like two services in this map. One is just a background service that is just, to view the land base and electrical features and stuff. And then I have, my Field Maps demo, which in this case is it's our pole inspection copy or whatever. So The red there is just showing poles that are yet to be inspected. The green are inspected poles type of thing. So just kind of what we've been using it for so far. So that's a good example for us to kind of show, since it's really what we've been doing with it on the field. So on the left side, then you see a bunch of different tabs. So the layer list of what I all have in this. There's some things that are pretty new, like tables and charts and stuff. I have not dealt with any of that stuff yet, but I think that's particular to this viewer. I don't think anything to do with field maps. So I won't go over a lot of that, but basically, you have the same type of things. If you want these things on or off by default, you click your extra option there. You can do a couple things like renaming and just some basic things. But so if I click on this, like on the right side, then is where it's all the actual, symbology changes, labeling, things like that. But I guess the most important thing here is to be very careful. Like, so the Field Maps demo service that I have in here, that's the one that I want to edit in Field Maps. So I would, if you're setting this up, configure your pop-ups first in this map viewer, get those all set up the way you want it. And then next we'll go into this Field Maps web app to do like all these extra functionality. The problem is if you go into, this is Field Maps, which I'm going to show in a second. So if I go into this Field Maps and make all these changes first, and then I go back into here, into the map viewer, and configure these pop-ups, it can erase what you've all set up in the Field Map side, which actually happened to me when I was setting this demo up. So it's something to be aware of. It does, when you save, it'll tell you that you might be like overwriting changes you've made. So if you get a message like that when you're hitting your save on the left here, I think it'll give you an option to do a save as instead. So if it's giving you that, you might want to just do a save as so you don't lose what you did. I think otherwise you can make whatever changes you want in here and it won't affect, the smart form capabilities and things like that. If you want to mess with the symbology and stuff, I guess some of that is set up in this Field Maps application as well. So just be careful about, I would start in this map viewer first and get this map looking exactly how you'd want to see it in Field Maps before going on to the next step, which is the Field Maps web application. So, I've already kind of set this all up, but there's really not a whole lot that you need to set up in here, really. Most of the stuff you're going to probably set up within ArcMap or ArcGIS Pro before you even get in here. So once you've kind of gotten this map looking the way you want it to, your pop-ups are set up and everything. Your pop-ups are just like what so before the pop-ups in the editing window was actually kind of the same thing in Collector. If whatever you'd set up as the pop-up was going to be pretty similar to what was in Collector, or in the editing portion. So now everything's going to be, the pop-up is just what you're viewing when you first click on it. And then when you hit into that edit, that point, it's going to look completely different because that's what we're going to be doing in the next step here. Does anybody have any questions on the map viewer stuff? I know if you've been using the old, what's considered the classic now, this is quite a bit of a change. So and I haven't used this a lot either. So it's just kind of, but I think now that's out of beta, I think everything's going to move to where you're probably going to want to get familiar with it and start using it. And it does look like there's some cool functionality in here that wasn't in, the classic version, to where you could maybe use this as like an office viewer a little bit more than what the classic gave you. So otherwise, I don't think there's really anything, you know, new in this that's really worth talking about, other than it's just more so the location of where all this stuff's at, and just making sure that if you're using this, it's going to be more compatible with the Field Maps web application that will be showing here. Okay, so you get to a point here then where this is the map that you want to see in Field Maps. Everything looks good as far as, you know, symbols and labels and all that stuff. And when you get to that point is where you'd want to switch over to this Field Maps. And I have it bookmarked here, but if you want to easily get between like this and your Field Maps web application, you click your like grid option up on the top where you sign in at. You'll see a lot of options here for stuff, but the Field Maps is kind of in the middle there. So that's what you're going to want to go to actually utilize all these smart form capabilities and all the, you know, new functionality. I'm just going to switch over to it here. So when you first come in, obviously into here, this view here, you're going to be needing to be signed in, obviously, under that same account that you're in on your ArcGIS Online account, or, you know, depending on if you're set up with your portal or whatever. But once you get in here, you really should just see all your web maps in there. And then from there, you just choose which one that you're going to, you know, be kind of editing and making changes to. And then it'll pop open into a new window here. So on the left side, we have some different options. There's actually some really cool stuff here as well. So we'll get into content. That's where we're going to do the main smartphone form stuff. I'll show that here shortly, but this is also where you'd go to make your offline stuff. So you can set up your map areas here. Enable it on. I don't think I have it. This one's not going to be set up for that, and that's because I have some tracking information from that tracker in here that's, you know, not enabled. But otherwise, we could just toggle that on, and then it would be a map that they could download as well. But I'll show that once we get in there. But what I think is cool is when you get into the settings here, there's a lot of stuff that we used to be able to do in Collector, but you had to do it per device. So if you have, you know, 5 people out there collecting information and you wanted to have them all do, you know, let's say sub-meter data collection, well, you would have to make sure that each one of those users went into their settings in Collector and changed that, which obviously there's not a great way to make sure that unless you're the one that set it up or whatever, it's hard to make sure that everybody has the same requirements. So now within Field Maps, in the settings, we actually have on a per map level, we can say, well, any map or any point created needs to be within 3 feet. And we can also do, you know, turn on GPS averaging so that it's not something that they can override as a field user. So a lot more control over that. So it's just another way of making sure that your data is good. You'll see the same thing with the streaming. You can even do like the field, if you have attachments turned on, we can specify, you know, the size, because obviously some of those get very big. You know, if it's something that's not that important, we can just make sure that we're keeping our data smaller and keep our photo size down. Snapping is another thing that they introduced in Collector at the end, and you know, it's onto this too. So that's in some scenarios very, very helpful. Let's just see what we got in another. Okay, so edit multiple as well is something that was added in Collector at the end, where you could add, you know, select 10 features and edit certain fields all at one time. There might be maps where you don't want them doing this and you want them to, you know, focus on one point, right? So you could turn that off here, which is way, a lot more control than we were given with the collector setup. So I think that stuff's really cool to make sure that we're getting good data, to be able to just kind of not turn off the stuff that they don't need or that we don't want them to use. Same options here with the collect here and the copy function, which I'll kind of show if you haven't seen it, that in the field map side, but just know that the options are here to turn this stuff off and on, depending on the map and what they're, the project that they're doing. Sharing, so it looks like you can do the sharing and stuff here as well to groups and stuff. Obviously you can do all of that stuff on the ArcGIS Online side that we were just into. But so it's really the two main things you probably focus on here is the settings, making sure that's set up per project. And then this content is where you're going to do all of the smart form stuff that was listed. So if I come here on the left side, it's got all of the layers that I have in this map that are editable. So you see how I don't have that big list of layers in here because the background stuff is brought in and was, is not to be edited, right? It's just the background to be viewed. So all I have in here is my Field Maps demo service. So if I click on that, you'll see the templates pop up. And this is just what they're going to see when they create a new feature, right? So we can click on inspection complete here and change this to say whatever we needed to, add a description. And then we can also fill in my default values. So I have in the star job, I put star demo, right? So any new point created is going to just say star demo. And I believe in the next step, I'll show you that put that as a read-only field. It's not something that I want the field guys changing. So anything in here can be, set to a default value. Otherwise, the rest of it is kind of in this form tab up here. So we'll go ahead and move over to that. Okay, so once you get into the form, this is where all the new stuff comes into play that will transfer into field maps and will be quite different from collector. So when you first start off, there's like an add all or add from pop-up, I think it's called. So you'd add, if you want to do it that way, where if you kind of have everything listed in the order you want it, and most of the fields that you have in that database or service is something that you want them to edit, you could just have them add it all in, it'll put it in the same order, and then you just kind of mess with the settings from there. Otherwise, you can just take these fields and just drag and put them into here. So all the ones on the right side here are fields that are not put into this form yet. So once you put it in there, you see like the status one that I just added is no longer in this field in this list on the right. I'm just gonna remove that one, but then it's just, if you click on each field, then you have some options there. So obviously the display name, you can have a placeholder text in there. Otherwise, there's a couple little things like the text box or just like a text area if they're writing, if it's a notes thing, you'd maybe want to have a text area, right? Maybe we'll go down to the bottom here and we'll change, like your priority notes, you could set that to the text area. Otherwise, we'll just kind of click through. I've tried to do like an example of each of the new features to kind of show you that, and then we can see them on the field map side. So there's your star job. I have this unchecked right here. So it says allow mobile users to edit. I uncheck that. So that's going to be a read-only field that they're going to see in the form. Now, if I go to inspection complete, I have required checked here. So they have to fill it out. And then I have, you know, most of these are all going to be checked with allow mobile users to edit, because that's, you know, kind of the point of it, right? So that'll show that. And then there's also the radio buttons option, which is pretty nice. And we'll see that on the back end a little better. So anything here with the little star next to it is fields that I've set to be required. You can, before too, you know, we had the workaround to do this stuff, but we didn't really have a good way of requiring a date, because you could require it, but it would automatic, because of the workaround, basically would just give it a random like 1899 date or something. So it really didn't actually work like it did on the other one. So now we can just do an actual requirement of a date field, which is very nice so that they actually have to go in, and then you can just change between if you want them just strictly the date is what's important, or a date and time picker as well. And again, if anybody has any questions, just go ahead and shout them out or put them in the chat and we'll take a look. Okay, so the next thing is the groups, right? So if I just exit out of this up top on the properties of that, I have form elements up here, and there's this group option. So I can take this and drag it in and create a new group in that location. I've already created some, so I'll just show you the ones I created. So what I did on this one is, you know, for like our inspections here, we have a couple different ways to break things up. So, you know, the initial information is probably the most important and is what needs to be required, and is something that, you know, happens at every single point. But then I have a poll group that just is the poll information, right? So if I open that up, see question here. Let me
you have a question.
Okay, can you set up the date as 2021-5-26, or does it come across as 5/26/21? Let's take a look. Looks like, at least from setting up a range, looks like it's going to be in that 5/26/21 setup, and it doesn't look like there's, I think in the pop-up setup, at least that's how it was in Classic, you could change that to visualize it however you want to see it. So I know that that's possible. We'll just see what it looks like when we'll add a date in there when we get to the app, and we'll see, or into the Field Maps, you know, mobile app, and we'll see. But I'm assuming it's just going to be set as your 5/26, your, you know, standard deal there. But on the actual pop-up stuff, when you configure that, I know there's an option there to change how you want that to be seen. So. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so I have my group here. It shows how many fields that I have in this group. We scroll down. You know, it's just your basic info that you want to collect for a poll, right? So it's just kind of nice to be able to group these. This is one, you know, inspection stuff, dealing strictly to the inspection stuff. So it's all, you know, guys, if there was repairs done, things like that. Before, you know, it's like trying to organize this stuff that, and normally we would have it in a very odd order, because it's, you know, you try to put the stuff that's used most at the top and the stuff not used as much on the bottom, but then you have stuff intermixed. You know, you got assembly stuff, and then you got maybe an inspection field that doesn't get used much. And so it's just hard for those guys on the field to really look through everything and find the field, which then causes people a lot of times to put stuff in a notes field. And that's tough to be able to do queries and things like that on the back end. So, so then within this assemblies group is where I've used the conditional visibility. So this is a pretty cool feature. So you'll notice like I got primary assembly 1 here that has, if I click on it, it's a domain list of all the different primary assemblies, right? I want that to show right away, but obviously there's a potential to have 3 or 4 primary assemblies on there, but I don't really want them to see all of those fields if they don't have to. If it's just a regular A1, I don't really want them to have to see 4 assembly fields. So I can, if I click on my primary assembly 2, I have a conditional visibility setup down here. When I click on that, I'll show you what my expression looks like. So this is basically telling it that if primary assembly 1 is not equal to null, it's going to display that field. So as soon as you say, okay, there's a A52 here or whatever, it's going to pop open this primary assembly 2 field and let you put in an additional assembly. So it's very nice. There's a lot of stuff that you can probably do with this that I have no clue on yet, because it's a arcade expressions is what these are using, and that's kind of newer. They were using it a little bit with the collector stuff in the last couple of years, but I have not done a lot with it. So if you're looking for expressions and stuff, there's documentation out there to kind of help, and that's kind of what I did here. If you actually click on this name down here and start that'll kind of give you what it's looking for an expression as far as the field, and then you can add this. In this scenario, they want it to look like that, to say not equal to or whatever. So there's a lot more you can do with this, but it's kind of a new language to me. It's not something that I've worked with a lot. So yeah, just kind of looking through examples and stuff is probably going to be the best bet on that. But I've done the same thing. Anything with this little conditional symbol there, I've done it with, the same thing. So my primary assembly 3 is the same, except it's looking at 2. So it only pops open if I've put something into primary assembly 2. We'll see as I go down, there's quite a few using that. And then in my last group here, I think I have one. I'm using it on a lot of these. I think the only one that's not set to be as null is like the priority notes. So priority found is just like a yes/no question. So then if they answer yes to that, they can get the primary notes field opened up, and then they can enter notes. So things like that, obviously, if that primary notes field is always there, and a field user might see it and maybe not read it properly or whatever, they might have notes in that field that shouldn't be because it wasn't, in this case, a priority. So it's nice to be able to just say, in this case, if priority found equals yes, bring the primary notes field in, and at that point they can fill that out. So that's kind of the big stuff, I think, for the most part. When we look at our list of SmartForm capabilities, I think I have an example of pretty much everything other than maybe the barcode scanning in that. So we'll now kind of transition away from the setup portion of it, and we'll get into what the actual mobile side looks like. So if anybody has any questions on the web app side or the setup part, be a good time for it. Otherwise, I'll share my screen on my iPad here. Okay. sharing here. Okay, are we looking all right as far as everybody seeing an iPad screen now?
Nope.
All right, so Field Maps app is, everybody hearing me okay, or does it sound off or anything?
No, can hear you.
Okay. Getting a little bit of, I don't know, feedback or something over here, but if everybody's, let me see here. If it's good on your end, then I'm good with that, so. Okay. All right, so the Field Maps app is this blue one I kind of have on the bottom kind of left side. So we'll get into that. When you first come in, you're going to see this screen that looks very similar to what you're going to, what you would normally see in Collector or Explorer. Maybe before I get into a map here, I'm just going to show you up on the top left is where all the settings are. And see, here is where we also had the settings that we were setting up in Field Maps, right? So I think this is like your default settings, but if it's required, if somebody has set something on the field on that particular map on the admin side, it's going to override, what the collection settings within here. Oops. There's really not a whole lot. There's not anything really new in here that wasn't in Collector. But one thing I did find out is if you tap on this on your name up top here, so this is our INS admin account. If you tap on it like 3 times in a row, and then 3 times in a row again, it actually brings up a developer option at the bottom. And that's how I'm getting it to show these touches on my screen. So if anybody's ever showing anybody through like a Zoom thing, they have it right within the app now. So it's pretty cool. And there's a couple other things in there that maybe, the simulate location or something that could be handy if you're doing any type of presenting of it. Otherwise, I talked about the track viewer earlier. So it's kind of nice. If I get out of here for a second, there's a separate tracker app that is right next to my Field Maps app. Previously you had, those were 2 separate things, in Collector and the tracker. So you'd have to go into the tracker app and actually say that you want to start tracking your location. And then you'd have to close out, go back into Collector then. So they've added that now, as long as it's a licensed thing, so you have to actually add that on. But as long as you have it set up on that user, it comes in here and shows you right there on device. And then you can just toggle that on, and it gives you some options for the duration for 8 hours or until you switch it off. So it's kind of nice. I'll kind of show that. I can show it a little bit on some of the information that we have on there. But if I go into the Field Maps demo map that I've been working on, it's just like Collector, where it's going to zoom to your location. I don't know if it does that on Explorer by default, because that's, or a map that's for view only. I think it kind of recognizes that, if I remember right, and knows that it just zooms it to like your full extent. Where if it's a map that you have editing layers in, it'll zoom to your location. So from there, if I zoom out and want to get back to my location, I can hit my little arrow on the top right. I'll kind of go through all this stuff. A lot of this is it's going to be exactly what you'd see in Collector, but just in case anybody hasn't used Collector or Explorer before, I'll just kind of go through that here so everybody kind of see, the main functionality and stuff. So I click it once, it does like a compass type of deal. If I click it again, it zooms into my location then. Then we'll just kind of start up at the top right and just show you what's all there for functionality. The first one is your layer list. That's going to pop open on the left and just lets you, toggle things off and on. There's some you can actually create like markup layers in there as well. I'll show the markup tools and stuff shortly. And you can actually like slide this down now and have it kind of hidden, but still, still open. So I thought that was kind of a nice little addition. The search option's the same. I don't know if there's really much set up on this, but same as your typical searches can be set up if you want to search on a poll number, location number, things like that. So that hasn't really changed at all. And then we'll go to like our more options on the top right here. So we got base map at the top. Obviously, if you're using it in live mode, then you got all the like Esri base maps available to you just like before. So we can switch over to imagery. Look at it that way. You can have your custom base maps in there as well. We have a bookmarks tab. So you have the default map extent. So I can kind of zoom out to, and that the map extent is going to be when we were like in that map viewer, right? It's where I saved what extent I had in there when I saved. So if you were your last thing, you were zoomed in on that when we were doing the setup, and then you saved, that's going to be what your default map extent is. So kind of something to be aware of. There's also, when you go into that bookmarks tab in My Places, and that's just saved. Those are so bookmarks are stuff you have to create on the admin side. My Places are stuff you can do yourself. So if I zoom to my location and I just do like a long hold on the star office here, it creates a pin, and then I can do on the bottom, add to my places, and just say star office. So then when I go into bookmarks, I got it right there. So that's a good way for your field users to add some points if they want to go back to something, or you could kind of use it as like a note thing. There's tools for that as well, but sometimes it might be a little easier to use that. And then like if I click on that, I could collect a point right there, or I can actually hit directions too, and it's going to pop it open in, I think I'll have it in Apple Maps, but you can actually set it to, you can have it set to open up into Google Maps or Apple Maps, or you could have it actually prompt and choose which one. So there's some cool options for navigation in there. And like I said, this is all stuff that they had within Collector at the end there too. But in case you weren't aware or hadn't been using it, it is there. Okay, then there's the edit multiple. I'll probably go through that after we go through the editing one feature. The legend, obviously, we kind of know what that is. Gives you all your symbols and what everything means. The markup's kind of weird. If you hit the plus button, it'll add a point, but it just kind of like adds it to the. Seems like it just kind of adds it to the center of what extent you're at. So if you're going to use that, I would, zoom into where you actually want it and hit your plus button. And then from there, we can add a label to it. That way, and then there is like an option to change colors and things. Otherwise, you can do like, if I draw a circle here, and then hit this little O button that comes up. I can also, draw some stuff there. Can you move the point after it's been placed? I don't think you can. I was playing with this a little bit yesterday because I hadn't used it a lot. And it doesn't seem like, it doesn't really seem like there's a way to edit that point once you've put it there. I could be wrong on that, but from playing with it yesterday, I did not see a lot of like options for that line feature. Yeah, so I don't think so, but if somebody else knows, definitely let me know. But I could not, I don't know. It seems a little weird the way this markup stuff tools work. But you can do like the color change here. Do that, but yeah, I don't know. I don't love the markup tools. I think they could probably improve some of that. But I think for the most part, I think they are the same as what was in collector at the end. But you'll see if I do a line there too, you can straighten that line out and everything. But so, sorry, I should show this too. Let's get into markup one more time. You'll see at the top right, so you make your markups here, and then in the top right, there's that box with the up arrow. So we can screenshot that and make it, something that if you want to send that on, right, to somebody out in the office or something like that. And then also you can do a markup layer, which if I hit that markup layer, it's going to create a new one that I can name. Otherwise, on the left side, I can hit the layer or the markup layers, and I have a demo markup here. But I can switch back and forth between different markup layers. So you could have, your own layers kind of set up in there and kind of have them toggled on and off as you need them. You can add a new one from there as well. But then once you get out of that markup layer, if you hit your layer list, see how I have the markup and then that demo markup, I can just turn that off and just have it on. So you could have whatever type of local, markups in there and just have them turned off and on as you need.
You got a question there, Bryce?
Okay. Markup layer can be exported to a shapefile. I don't think so. I think all it's got is well, I shouldn't say that. Not within field maps. That data is, I believe, is out there in your layer list that I think you can export it from there. I think that's something we'd have to check. I think that's listed within like our map viewer that when we were doing the setup. I think those layers are in there now. And I think you can actually save that from there. But I'll take a look at that and see if that's, because they are listed. I'm just looking at it now on my screen here. Oh, maybe not. Okay, so they are not listed on the field map side. So I'm assuming you probably can export those. But I'll look at that a little deeper and see if that's a possibility, if you can get those off the device. Otherwise, if they're doing a lot of that stuff, I would just recommend creating a new service that has some that you can use as a markup. But then it would actually store that data and you could export it to shapefiles. You could create a service that basically does the same thing as these markup tools that you're just kind of using for drawing and stuff. So I would recommend doing that if you want to save stuff and be able to export it. I think that's pretty much it. Measure stuff. We'll go over sharing is going to be kind of the same deal. You're really just sharing, I think, a link to it. So then that's kind of our little settings. We'll get into actual data creation then, right? So on the bottom right is where your add new feature option is, and that's the same as before. It gives me the two options that I had set up when we were in the Field Maps web application. So I'm just going to do, in this case, we'll just do an inspection complete item. I don't have a GPS location being inside here, so I'm going to hit add point in red. Otherwise, it would automatically create a point. And if I was in, I have the 7 feet required up at the top, assuming that I was within that, it would create the point, and that part would be good to go. I'm going to hit add point. It's going to say that, let me know that my location's poor. In this case, it's fine. And then if I needed to update that at all, I can just move my crosshairs. Let's say it's supposed to be on the back side of the building or something. I can just hit update point, and it's going to move it onto that now. So the updating is pretty easy there. Then you'll kind of see all the stuff we just set up. So the star demo, remember how we had that as a read-only field? So I can't click on that and do anything. It's just giving me information. The inspection complete was where we set the radio buttons. So as soon as I switch that, you'll also see that symbol switch, because now I'm saying it has not been done. So those radio buttons will help a lot, because it's one less click to get into a new tab, right? Inspected by is I don't have a list there, so that's something I would just type in. But what's nice is you don't see it here yet, but on the bottom middle section there, it's going to have recent values. So if I'm doing the same points over and over, I can reuse those recent values as well. So you could obviously have a drop down button, but if maybe that list is changing a lot and it's just a simple thing like this, a lot of times we've kind of went to just, you type your name in the first point of the day, then the rest of them, you hit the recent value button so that they don't have to retype it every time. Inspection date, we can just click on and set to today. It looks like it's got that typical 5/26/21 setup, but you can, just because that's how it views here is not how it has to be. That stuff can be changed on the viewing side, or if you're exporting that data, obviously you can have it format in a different way. Inspection codes, so we'll just do generic. So those are all the items that I have to do, the required items. And I do know they've changed too. Before, the submit button on the top right was not even there. If you couldn't submit it, or if you didn't have all the fields. Now you can submit, but it's going to give you an error and say you have two fields that have not been, two required fields that haven't been filled out. So then we just see our stuff for our groups and stuff, right? So I can open those up and enter that information in. We'll go down to the assembly. So see how I only have primary assembly 1 listed. I click on that and I say it's a A11. Primary assembly 2 pops open, and then I can fill out primary assembly 3. So you can see how this can really clean up the data collection and make them use the first one first, so you don't have something listed in the 4th field but nothing in the the first one. I think I got some of the same ones set up for some of these other fields, but obviously they work the same. Same as priority filing. We talked about that one. So if I choose yes, it opens priority notes field. So there's a lot of cool things that make data collection a lot easier. And on top of it, you're combining applications together. So it's really seems to be quite a bit better than what the old setup is, and really haven't seen anything come across that bugs or anything like that. But I see I'm kind of right over the time here. So if there's questions and stuff, we can keep going. I don't have anything going on right away here, so we can continue to look at anything in particular if anybody wants to, or Anybody got any questions on any of it? All right, well, if anybody, like I say, anything anybody wants to see in more depth, we can do that. Otherwise, thanks for attending the webinar. Hopefully we can start doing some more in-person stuff, and appreciate everybody tuning in.
Thanks, Bryce.
Oh, we got it.
How does info
Oh, here we go.
update back to the office? Is there any approval required by GIS Tech?
Okay, so the info back to the office, or the question, how does info update back to the office? Is there any approval required by GIS Tech? So in this scenario, it's up in ArcGIS Online. So that data, as soon as they hit submit, it's back to the cloud, saving in that cloud database. There's nothing additional that needs to be done or anything. As long as they hit their required fields, that's there. If you're on a server situation, it's going to be the same as what like collector and everything was. So with collector, you can add, if you were using like an offline map and you sync those points back, there's a nightly process that would reconcile points so that there's no conflicts. So you would have a something to run to kind of make sure that that database is stored, but that's only when it's on your server that data is actually stored, and it doesn't occur if they're using it in a live situation. Then the data is just there. So there's really, once that data is submitted, if you're in live mode, it's already either in your cloud database or on your server, GIS data. There really isn't anything additional that would need to be done. But good question though.
Bryce, where would we find the video of this seminar?
I think just shoot me an email if you're looking for it, and I'll work with Danielle. We'll just get it forwarded on through email probably.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. All right, well, if there's obviously anybody that has anything more that, doesn't want to go over it today or whatever, feel free to reach out and we can always, zoom in or team viewer into your machines and help with setup or anything like that. Or, I've done some demos through Zoom to field crews as well. So if anybody's looking to have that, I can always get something scheduled and we can kind of get something to show the field guys too if you're looking for that. So I guess if nobody has any more questions, we'll let you guys go here. And thanks again for attending, and hope you guys have a good rest of your day.